Always great to get Ed Lane on the Sports Buffet podcast, the king of the Southside, at least at that, maybe the king of a good portion of the United States and world. I kid because I care. Ed's a good guy, though. You can listen to him on Southside Sports Media. Find him on Facebook at Edward Lane. He joined me to talk Piedmont District football. Two big games in the Piedmont tonight. The Bulldogs of Martinsville taking on Bassett and Tunstall in Patrick County. Ed breaks those down as well as talks about the 6A format here on the Sports Buffet podcast.
Ed Lane, always a pleasure when he joins me here on the Sports Buffet podcast, Southside Sports Media. You can hear an action-packed game on the airways tonight. And Ed, it's really two teams that are having interesting seasons with Bassett and Martinsville. How do you see this one shaking?
That's a million-dollar question. It's definitely the unpredictable of the two Piedmont District games, with Patrick County and Tunstall being the other one, and I think most people have at least a better idea of what to expect there. These are two teams that, at the beginning of the year, both started out with a good deal of hope and excitement. Martinsville is a team that had the preseason offensive player of the year at quarterback in Brandon Carter. He's been nicked up and has missed some time this year. They're a team that a couple games into the season found out that their coach Bobby Dalton would be continuing on for the rest of the year, but this would be his final year. They host a Bassett team that things looked on the up and up. They returned the majority of starters from last year's team. They had size up front. They had athleticism. They had a switch at quarterback with Mackenzie Lawson, moving Deshaun Valentine to fullback. I mean, things looked really promising for them, and through 4 games it looked like it might happen. They beat Carroll County. They lost to Patrick Henry, who's a very good AAA school, as you know, and then they were in ball games against Jefferson Forest and also against Christiansburg before a couple of late miscues. And for both of them, their seasons, I think, at 1-6 each, it's safe to say, have not panned out the way they want, and I think it makes it very difficult to get a full gauge on what to expect this evening.
The other matchup, like you mentioned, is Tunstall and Patrick County. Two teams heading in opposite directions. Of course, Tunstall, heartbreaker last week against Magna Vista. Patrick County just hasn't been able to put one on the left side yet. If you're Patrick County, what do you do?
I think you're looking toward the next couple of seasons, and I think the first thing you obviously would measure right now is effort and then ability from the guys you have right now. Who on this team is giving it their all through adversity? Because it's easy for everyone to play hard when you're undefeated. It's easy for guys to get motivated in practice and amped up for games and excited and playing hard for 4 full quarters. What happens when things aren't going your way? When you're down 28-0 in the first half, and that's been a theme for Patrick County. And I think at this point you want your guys to show that. I think the next thing you're looking for is who just has the ability. So that as a coaching staff for Kenny Perry, you can have an idea of, okay, this is the guy that I envision in this role. We can start him off in that this year, and we can really take this off season and do that. I think you have your eye on tonight's game against Tunstall, but you also, I think, just to be reasonable, have to be putting part of your focus on the bigger picture, which is the long-term health and the long-term growth of this Cougar football program.
I came on your tailgate show and I offered the opinion of Tunstall, after losing a heartbreaker to Magna Vista, and when the team hasn't seen a ton of adversity this year, they might feel the pressure to play perfect against Patrick County when perfection might not be needed. No offense to the Cougars. How do you see that breaking down on Tunstall's side?
I think it's a good question. They've had a couple of other close games this year, and that to me is why I think it is okay for Patrick County and things are for Tunstall rather, why things break their way. Because I think they had to bounce back. They had the game I sort of look at really is, you look at their loss to Gretna. They came off a Rustburg game. They were in that contest. They hadn't beaten Gretna and really hadn't even been competitive with them in a decade. And they lose by 3 on a touchdown with under 2 minutes to go. They had a double bye, meaning 3 weeks between games, and nobody knew what to expect out of this Tunstall team. I know I didn't. I didn't know whether this team would really come out and perform well and certainly win against Stanton River. The fact they won 35-7 showed me that they've been in this spot before. They have less week off, and like you said, with all due respect to Patrick County, they're not on the same level as Stanton River is, and they showed that earlier when they played on the football field. I think for Tunstall, the key is you have to deal with that loss to Magna Vista, knowing that, okay, the odds are very slim that we're going to even get a share in the Piedmont District Championship, much less win the thing outright. Because Magna Vista has a bye, they have 2 games left. They've been there before, and they've won plenty of close games. For Tunstall, the next step is, okay, can we continue to improve each week, knowing that the AA Region 4 Division 3 portion of the state playoff bracket right now is pretty wide open. And I think for Tunstall, you can't get too caught up with that, but you have to be thinking, all right, we're in pretty good position to maybe get a bye or have a home playoff game the first round. If we don't get a bye, we need to be thinking about improving each and every week, and that needs to be the focus for this team right now. And if you do that, I think things will take care of themselves against the Cougars.
We'll close with this. The Virginia High School League has approved the 6A system in all sports. We've been doing that in football for a good long time now, but it's going to happen in other sports. It's going to affect the Piedmont District as well with some new additions to the league. What's your opinion as a whole?
There's no perfect system. I'd love to find it, but you're counting on people who have other jobs, and again, we look at this, Bob, from the sports fans' perspective, because, I mean, that's what we do. I have Southside Sports Media, the Sports with a podcast, and ABC 13's Football Friday. You do have to consider what's in the best interest and the overall welfare of the student athletes, and on the field, you may not like competing against a school that's a couple sizes bigger than you are, or even a couple sizes smaller than you are. But at the same time, you have to remember, is it worth driving an extra hour both ways on a weeknight when you theoretically have to be focused as well on being a student and then an athlete? Right. And I think you have to consider that. I don't think there's a perfect setup, but I think you make the best of what you have, and it's why it's considered the solution for now. And the for now part has been talked about by some schools more than others, but that's where it has to be. I'm generally okay with it, and I actually tend to think that the bigger schools in a classification, your GW Danville, your Patrick Henry, your Franklin County especially, Patrick Henry and Franklin County are the 2 6A schools. Everyone they play is going to be smaller than they are. So when they have to go play in the state playoff, they're not as prepared, whereas take Martinsville, for example. They're a smaller school. They're shrinking. They go from what was the equivalent of 3A when they were in AA Division 3 to now 2A, which is the same thing as 4A Division B. So they actually effectively drop down a level. They get to play tougher teams now with the addition of Franklin County, GW, and Halifax, and they're in a spot where they're going to be better prepared to play postseason games. And for sports like basketball and soccer, where they have talent, but they've always run into either a Blacksburg or they've run into a Cave Spring, they don't have to deal with that anymore. And I think for a team like that, it's golden long term because it sets them up for the state playoffs a little better than it does your larger schools. There's nothing that can prepare them for it.
You're going to see some really, really bad matchups, I think, long term in the region and state tournaments, though.
Yeah, I think that is possible. I want to know, for you, Bob. I'm just curious, what makes you say that?
Well, I mean, I just think the more you let in, it doesn't make it better necessarily. I think sometimes the more you let in, I love high school sports, but when you have 2 bad teams playing, it's sometimes, or 2 teams that are not, all right, let me put it this way. Heritage and Brookville are playing tonight here in Lynchburg. That's going to be a very, very good game. But when you have 2 other teams playing, let's say Patrick County and let's say they were playing Martinsville tonight, that's not as good of a game. If we have teams like Patrick County and Martinsville, and I don't think football is really going to be affected as much because they've been doing this the whole time, but when you look at maybe boys or girls soccer or volleyball or something like that, to where you're putting teams in that just struggled mightily through the regular season that somehow get in the regionals. I don't know. That's where my fear comes in.
And I think that part of it is a great point. I'm okay with the deeper postseason matchups being more evened out when you have a school like Martinsville going against K-Spring, which still practically has twice as many students. And don't get me wrong, Martinsville, I'm looking at some of the basketball games they played. I think Martinsville let the athletes staying with them. It just hasn't happened.
Right.
But for what you're looking at, I think you bring up a great point. I look back, and I know you mentioned football, and I know the VHSL is looking at a bottom line and the money side of things. And again, I don't pretend to have all the financial details in front of me, so I can't give all of that. But I remember last year we looked at the 4 games that featured the AA Region 4 playoffs, Division 3 and Division 4, and in the first round of the playoffs, all 4 road teams had a losing record, and all 4 road teams lost. The average margin of defeat, and this is in football last year, for the first round of the playoffs, when you let pretty much everyone in, the average margin of defeat was 29 points. The only game that was even remotely close was Hidden Valley's 24-10 win against Bassett. That was the only game that was close.
Right.
And, that to me is diluting the competition. And, I understand teams go out there and they give it their all, but you're also 1-9, 2-8, 3-7 late in the year. What are you really gaining going to an environment where you're going up against a team that you know is that much better than you are, and you pretty much know what the outcome is going to be? You didn't see the upsets in the first round last year. And to me, that makes complete sense, Bob.
I don't hear that very often, Ed, so I think we probably should stop here, but we'll revisit it down the road, and of course we'll talk some Piedmont District football next week. As always, appreciate your time.
Bob, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.